all of us who come back from war must devote every moment of our lives to fighting war. And nothing becomes minimal. I had lunch recently with Daniel Berrigan, who I admire immensely, who will baptize my little daughter next Thursday. And Berrigan said, and I think correctly, that those of us who come back to protect the sanctity of life are called to do the good, or at least the good insofar as we can perceive it, to hold fast to these moral imperatives, never to compromise, not to be practical, that it's not our job to know where that good goes. Perhaps it goes somewhere, perhaps it doesn't. Once we carry out that act to protect the sanctity of life, we who come out of a faith tradition trust, believe that it goes somewhere, but we can't know where it goes. Our job is done. And my own frustration with my own religious tradition, with the liberal class, is that they've made too many compromises with the forces of death. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are illegal under post-Nuremberg laws. They are defined as all preemptive wars defined as criminal wars of aggression. We have no right as a nation to debate the terms of the occupation. And the great tragedy for me of the Obama administration is that it has codified the destruction of both domestic and international law that was put in place by the Bush administration. We who care about these moral imperatives forgot that when you hold fast to the callings of truth and justice, you inevitably pit yourself against those who are seduced by the callings to privilege and power. And that the closer you step towards those whose ultimate aim is privilege and power, the more corrupted and compromised you become. All of the correctives to American democracy never came about by anyone or any group that achieved formal political power. The Liberty Party that fought slavery, the suffragists, the labor movement, the civil rights movement. It's not our job to take power. Karl Popper, in The Open Society and Its Enemies, writes that the question is not how do you get good people to rule. As Popper points out, most people who are attracted to power are at best mediocre, which is Obama, or venal, which is Bush. The question is, how do you stop the powerful from doing as much damage as possible? And that failure on the part of us who should be speaking with a moral voice in this society has permitted a liberal establishment, including a Democratic Party, to carry out crimes, not only against Iraqis or Afghanis, but against the poor, against working men and women within our own country. And we face now what Sheldon Wolin, probably our greatest living political philosopher, calls a system of inverted totalitarianism. And by that, Wolin means that it's not classical totalitarianism. It doesn't find its expression through a demagogue or a charismatic leader, but through the anonymity of the corporate state. That in classical totalitarian regimes, you have a radical or a revolutionary force that overthrows a decaying structure and replaces it. In inverted totalitarianism, you have corporate power that purports to pay fealty to the Constitution, electoral politics, the iconography and language of American patriotism, and yet has so controls the levers of power as to render the citizen impotent. And I think Wolin's right. I think what we have undergone in this country is a kind of coup d'etat in slow motion. And for those of us who believe in that moral imperative, the only thing we have left is to step outside these formal structures of power and begin to engage in acts of civil disobedience, nonviolent civil disobedience. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of my friend Wendell Berry, who I admire immensely, but Wendell is saying exactly the same thing, which is why he and several activists occupied the governor's office in Kentucky to oppose the destruction of Appalachia by the coal companies. It's certainly why I joined 133 veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, along with Daniel Ellsberg, who is a Vietnam vet, and we chained ourselves to the White House fence until we were arrested. It's why on April 15th in New York City, in Union Square, I'll be part of an effort to occupy Bank of America. There's a branch right down here, which, like General Electric, didn't pay any taxes last year or the year before. I think that our society is in crisis. I think the institutions that have the capacity to speak with a moral voice, and I certainly look to the liberal church, which formed me and nurtured me, to begin to stand up and make that kind of a commitment, because no one else is going to do it. The universities, the press, culture, labor, the Democrats have either withered away or become so compromised by corporate power that they no longer speak in the words which I think our beleaguered nation so desperately needs to hear. Thank you.
Good. We have time for some questions. We built in tonight a period here after Chris's comments to us, a period for some questions. So I'd like to invite you, if you have questions that you would like to address to Chris Hedges, we've got microphones here in the aisles. If you feel moved to bring a question, either clarifying question or a place out of you that needs some discernment this evening, we'll invite you to come forward. And as always, please come with some curiosity about you. I'd like to just before that, remind you that Chris Hedges will be in the fellowship hall after this event to sign books and be in conversation with us, and we would encourage you to stay for that and to take home what he's been writing and to sit with that as well. So just to begin, Chris, my first question to you is, in what you said tonight, you hinted at the response that individuals can take on in contact with the power and the seduction of empire in its many forms. Not everyone in the room, of course, is going to have the same participation with the force or violence or war that empire carries out. And so I wonder, for those of us who are participating in the systems of power, are there practices that you found that you would recommend to people in the room that help cultivate a different relationship to power? I mean, I know that you mentioned in your latest book how very compromised even the liberal church is and complicit in all of this. And so I'm curious, on a level of individual response, what you might offer from your experience of practices. I know you mentioned civil disobedience, but other practices and resources that help shift an individual's relationship with those structures of power as they are.
Well, those of us who come back from watching what empire does, and this I think is true for many combat veterans, certainly the ones who become self-aware, can never reintegrate in society because we understand that everything we have been taught by every institution in this society is a lie. That we are not a virtuous nation, that God does not promise us victory, that we are as capable of committing evil as those who are opposed against us. I think that what a lot of these vets experience is an existential crisis. And the message that they deliver is a message that is very uncomfortable for people to hear, because it strikes at the core of our own conception of ourself as a good and virtuous people. And that engenders not only alienation, but anger. And Augustine said, hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are and the courage to see that they don't remain the way they are. My frustration in particular with the liberal church is its failure to take on the Christian right. We all graduated from seminary, we studied the Christian Gospels, we studied the teachings of Jesus Christ, and then we walked out the door into the wider world and had to look at people like Joel Osteen or Pat Robertson or Rod Parsley, or isn't Newt Gingrich trying to wear this, and said nothing. These people have acculturated the Christian religion with the worst aspects of American imperialism, consumerism, greed, and capitalism. And we said nothing. We talked about tolerance. We talked about inclusiveness. We talked about multiculturalism, all of which are fine, but not when you forget justice. And I think in many ways,